Bankers and their web of derivatives across the world, again, it's 1.5 quadrillion of derivatives, are more important than the jobs of 3 to 5 million Americans. If you wipe out Detroit, the American living standard falls by about 25%. That would be my estimate.
Stay there. Back in 70 seconds. Webster Tarpley is our guest in studio for another 45 minutes, and we'll get updates from the shanty towns being converted to FEMA camps in California with two of our reporters on scene, Rob Dew and Jason Douglas. Okay, Webster, we were ranting during that 1 minute break. I mean, just in summation, I don't want you to break it down in your own words. Well, I mean, you go ahead. We were just talking about it. It's this incredible double standard.
It's absolute hypocrisy, absolute double standard. Obama is the greatest con artist of our time. He says to the auto industry, you guys have to prove viability. You have to show me a model that gets you profitable. They submit a plan and he says, this is not good enough. I'm giving you 30 more days, or I'm giving you a little bit more time. Now, notice what happens. When Citibank needs $20 billion, they get it right away. They don't have to prove anything. They don't have to tell where the money is going. They don't have to say how many billions go for bonuses. They don't have to say how much of it goes to Dubai or other foreign countries. The duplicity of Obama couldn't be more evident. We had last week Geithner coming forward with another $100 billion, followed by really another $1 trillion for derivatives only. And now we're being told that the automobile industry has not gone far enough towards proving its viability. Remember these moments.
And the sharks are coming in saying, we're going to make you break down. We're going to take your pension funds. We're going to make you be sold out to foreigners, you know, the scrap, the husk. And then meanwhile, unless you're talking about this in your own words, then the banks flush with all this money. They won't even, money given to them, they won't even loan it to the auto industry.
Yeah. See, the whole point of the TARP, right, the bailout of last October, the original $700 billion, we were told, you've got to have a viable banking system to provide credit for the economy. Well, $700 billion has been put in, and Geithner is now promising up to another $1 trillion more. So that's almost $2 trillion. Now, I want to know. We're told that Chrysler and General Motors need financing. Where is J.P. Morgan Chase? They got $25 billion out of the TARP. Where is Citibank? They've been refinanced twice and counting. At least $40 billion has gone into Citibank. How come they're not lending to Ford and Chrysler and GM? How about Bank of America? The zombie banks are taking the money from the public till, and they're not lending it. I would also add these things like Circuit City, right? 600 stores, 35,000 jobs. Where were those banks that are cashing in on the TARP gravy train, right? The big bailout money. They're not lending. Why are we supporting these banks? The whole idea of this process, think about it at the beginning. We were told this is not a bailout of Wall Street. This is a bailout of Main Street. We want to make that money available to Main Street. Well, Detroit is Main Street. Detroit is everybody's Main Street. The Midwest industrial economy around the Great Lakes is the heart of this country. You rip that out, this country goes into thermodynamic collapse. Living standards will collapse. The level of morbidity and mortality in the population will skyrocket. In other words, millions of people will be on their way towards much earlier deaths than they would have had otherwise.
But talk about LImbaugh. We'll come back. I mean, specifically, he says give trillions to the banks. Yeah, that's good. And they don't have to tell the Congress where the money went. Bernanke won't say where it goes. But then meanwhile, loans to GM, loans to Chrysler, that is socialism.
Absolutely. See, Limbaugh's record is the following. Limbaugh says, I'm going to focus on the $20 billion for food stamps. I'm going to focus on $50 billion for aid to people with facing foreclosure. He doesn't care about the $10 trillion that went to the banks. He's not really, he's not in an uproar about that. He's got a class-conscious standard. In other words, he represents Wall Street. He's somebody who was obviously promoted by William F. Buckley, somebody who was introduced to Henry Kissinger at an early age. He was brought in with the help of Roger Ailes and others. So he's basically telling you that the problem with Obama is that Obama is taking your money and giving it to the deadbeats and the losers and the underachievers. And he talks about the achievers, the achieving class, are, of course, the bankers, in Limbaugh's words. He had a woman call him up the other day.
Stay there. We got a break. Come back and tell the story. This is very important. Then we'll break down the good plan to fix things versus what their plan is. We'll profile both of those, Webster Tarpley, as we watch the world slide into deep depression, and the bankers couldn't be happier. Okay, Webster, Tarpley in studio. A lot of key info to cover. Finish up with how Obama and LImbaugh, they're really on the same team. They just create the illusion of choice and that a fight is going on. Obama props up LImbaugh with a phony right wing. LImbaugh, as White House memo says, props up Obama with his supporters because they say, well, we hate Obama. Then Limbaugh's saying he's helping the poor when in reality he isn't. He's imploding the economy, going into shock therapy. So this is how this mind game works. Break it down.
Well, Obama is not the new Roosevelt. He's the new Carter. He's not the new Deal. He's the new Malaise, except that the handlers of Obama, the Brzezinskis and Volkers and so forth, have learned from Carter that you can't just go with austerity, sacrifice, blood, sweat, and tears, malaise, and all this stuff. You've got to have some window dressing up front. So Obama, also to placate various Democrats in the House and Congress in general, Obama has put some pieces, some crumbs, some chum, right, have been thrown up front. The $20 billion for food stamps, $40 billion for unemployment benefits, maybe $50 to $60 billion for infrastructure. Now, the U.S. infrastructure deficit is maybe $5 trillion, $7 trillion, $8 trillion. Instead, we get $50 to $60 billion of infrastructure from Obama. So this is basically camouflage and window dressing. But notice what LImbaugh does. LImbaugh attacks the Cape, not the Matador. LImbaugh attacks these penny ante camouflage things that are set up there in the foreground, and he ignores the fact that you have all of this money going to the bank. So this is a charade. In other words, this is a dog and pony show that's now being set up. Limbaugh says Obama's a socialist, and he's actually helping Obama. Every time when Limbaugh attacks Obama as a socialist or somebody who's helping the deadbeats, helping the poor, helping the losers, that helps Obama because a large number of people say, well, you know, under Limbaugh, we'd be left with nothing but our eyes to cry with. So this is a terrible, terrible situation. Now, you asked before, what can you do in this situation, right? How do you get out of a depression? There are four possibilities that have been tried, right? One is what the Republicans say. They say deflation. They say...
Well, let me stop you. Go back to the economic theory when this was developed, these four systems.
Okay, well, this is a speech by this guy Lautenbach to the Friedrich List Society in Berlin in September of 1931. So Germany is sliding rapidly into depression. The British have just defaulted on gold, September 1931. The world depression is getting really deep, and they're looking at the threat of Hitler. So these guys in the German central bank said, well, what should we do? And Lautenbach gave this speech to this famous meeting where he said, look, one way would be deflation. Cut the budget, cut public expenditure, try to balance the budget, let everybody go bankrupt. This is essentially what Andrew Mellon was talking about, right? The guy who ran Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. When Andrew Mellon said, liquidate stocks, liquidate bonds, liquidate real estate, liquidate labor, too bad if you die, right? Or Schumpeter says, creative destruction. Well, if you get destroyed, you're not going to feel very creative. So that obviously, says Lautenbach, that's no good. What's the other one? Well, there's the Keynesian one, what later became the Keynesian one, which is have a consumer-led recovery. Give people money, let them go out and buy refrigerators and shoes and electronics and so forth. The problem with that is once you've done it once, you have the same problem next year. In other words, it might give you a very mild, immediate lift, but it doesn't solve anything durable.
And then it leads into inflation.
Leads into inflation. And I think this is what the House Democrats think of. People who are Keynesian, who really are Keynesian, think this. The other example would be the French Popular Front of 1936. And
the bankers like that because you get shoes and refrigerators and iPods, but then they get the interest on that debt. But go ahead.
Yeah, but as Lautenbach says, this consumer-led stuff, it doesn't get you anywhere. In other words, whatever you spend, it gives you a little bit of a lift, but then you're back in the depression. The third one is the hot money alternative. Just start the printing presses, do what Bernanke is doing now, right? He's helicopter Ben Bernanke because of this speech where he says, if you have a depression, you take bales of dollar bills and put them on the front lawns of bankers, and then you reflate the system with hot money. And as Lautenbach says, that doesn't work because a lot of that money will flee overseas as hot money. And that's what we've had with the TARP, right? The money went to Barclays of Britain, to Deutsche Bank of Germany, to Société Générale of France, investments in Dubai, in India, in Israel, and the U.S. automobile industry is collapsing. So that doesn't work. Then, says Lautenbach, What is left is building infrastructure. In other words, permanent, valuable upgrades and improvements to the capital stock of your nation. Long-term, durable investments in rail systems, transportation, electricity generation, canals, locks, water systems, electronic infrastructure of all sorts. And he says the problem with that is simply the banks need to be supported by a national bank. Let's say the United States decides to build 50,000 miles of maglev rail, and we want to have a railroad from New York to San Francisco. We want to have a northern transcontinental, a southern transcontinental, and then we have New York to San Francisco. You'd issue bonds. The bonds would be bought by banks. In other words, the states or the federal government could issue bonds for this. As long as the person who buys the bonds can turn around as a banker and say to the Federal Reserve, I want money for that. In other words, I'm giving you transcontinental